They saw it coming. That's the part nobody talks about. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. 2,400 Americans dead. 8 battleships destroyed. The worst naval defeat in U.S. history. Everyone calls it a surprise attack. But here's the truth. It wasn't a surprise. America had warnings. Multiple warnings. Radar detected the attack. A submarine was sunk hours before. Intelligence intercepts showed Japan preparing for war. Every piece of information needed to stop Pearl Harbor existed, and America ignored all of it. This isn't a story about Japanese brilliance. This is a story about American failure. A cascade of mistakes so catastrophic that it let 353 enemy aircraft cross 230 miles of ocean and destroy the Pacific Fleet in 2 hours. The question that haunted investigators for years wasn't why Japan attacked. It was how every single warning sign was missed. How every safeguard failed. How the impossible became inevitable. Because Pearl Harbor was preventable. Multiple times, multiple ways. And understanding how America failed to prevent it reveals something terrifying about how nations stumble into catastrophe. Summer, 1941. 6 months before Pearl Harbor. American intelligence is watching Japan obsessively. Navy codebreakers have cracked Japan's diplomatic code called Purple. They can read Japanese diplomatic messages almost as fast as Tokyo can, and those messages are alarming. Japanese diplomats are asking detailed questions about Pearl Harbor, ship locations, defenses, patrol patterns, anchor positions. How many ships are in port on weekends versus weekdays? Why would diplomats need this information unless they're planning something? But here's the problem. American intelligence is fractured. The Army has its intelligence division. The Navy has its own. The FBI is doing separate work. State Department has diplomatic intelligence. Nobody is coordinating. Nobody is connecting dots. Army intelligence discovers something important and doesn't tell the Navy. Navy finds a clue and doesn't share it with the Army. Bureaucratic turf wars are more important than national security. Even worse, Washington is operating under a dangerous assumption. The assumption that Japan would never attack America directly. The logic seems sound. Japan's economy is 1/10 the size of America's. Their military is smaller. Their industrial capacity is laughable. War with America would be national suicide. Rational analysis says Japan would never attack. Therefore, they won't. This assumption becomes gospel. Intelligence analysts see warnings and dismiss them. Not because the warnings aren't credible, but because they don't fit the narrative. Japan is rational. Rational actors don't commit suicide. Therefore, any intelligence suggesting an attack on American territory must be misinterpreted. Must mean something else. Must be targeting the Philippines or Southeast Asia instead. Admiral Husband Kimmel commands the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. General Walter Short commands Army forces in Hawaii. Both receive vague warnings from Washington. Be alert. War is possible. Take precautions. But Washington doesn't say where, doesn't say when, doesn't provide specifics that would allow proper preparation. Just be ready for everything. Kimmel and Short are expected to defend against every possible threat. Sabotage, submarine attack, air raid, invasion. With limited resources, limited aircraft, limited personnel, they have to prioritize. And without specific intelligence, they prioritize wrong. November 1941, 1 month before Pearl Harbor. American intelligence notices something disturbing. Japan's aircraft carriers have disappeared. For weeks, Navy intelligence tracked Japanese carrier movements through radio signals. Monitoring their communications, plotting their positions, standard procedure. Then suddenly, complete silence. Radio blackout. The carriers are gone. Where are they? American analysts debate frantically. Some think they're in Japanese home waters. Some think they're preparing for Southeast Asia operations. Some think they're conducting training exercises. Almost nobody considers they might be steaming toward Hawaii. Why not? Because it seems impossible. 6 aircraft carriers crossing 2,000 miles of ocean without detection, maintaining radio silence for weeks, refueling at sea, operating that far from home bases. American planners can't imagine it. They look at the logistics and think, we couldn't do it, therefore Japan can't either. This is called mirror imaging, assuming your enemy thinks like you, plans like you, operates by your rules. American naval doctrine says carriers need extensive support. Supply ships, escorts, communication with headquarters, operating independently for weeks seems reckless. Therefore, Japan wouldn't try it. But Japan isn't following American rules. They're desperate. Desperate nations take desperate risks. Those missing carriers are exactly where American intelligence can't imagine, steaming toward Pearl Harbor in complete radio silence, refueling from tankers at sea, maintaining strict emission control, approaching from the north where American reconnaissance is weakest. The intelligence to predict Pearl Harbor existed. Japan's carriers disappeared heading east. Japanese diplomats were asking detailed questions about Pearl Harbor. Tensions were at maximum. War was obviously imminent. Connect those dots and the conclusion is clear: carrier strike on Pearl Harbor. But nobody connected them. Nobody could imagine Japan would actually try something so audacious. December 7, 1941, 7:02 a.m., Opana Point on the northern tip of Oahu. Two Army privates, Joseph Lockard and George Elliott, are operating a mobile radar station. They're supposed to shut down at 7 a.m., but Lockard wants practice, so they keep running. Suddenly, the scope lights up. Largest return they've ever seen. Lockard thinks the equipment is malfunctioning. Checks everything. All systems normal. This is real. Massive formation of aircraft. Distance 137 miles. Heading straight for Oahu, from the north. Elliott grabs the phone. Calls the information center at Fort Shafter. Young lieutenant answers. Only officer on duty because it's Sunday morning. Everyone else is at breakfast. Lockard gets on the line. We have a massive flight of aircraft approaching from the north. Biggest contact we've ever seen. The lieutenant thinks for exactly 3 seconds. He remembers B-17 bombers are expected from California this morning. Coming from that direction. Must be them. He tells the privates, don't worry about it. Must be the B-17s. Shut down your station. Lockard insists this is way bigger than 12 bombers. The lieutenant is dismissive. It's the B-17s. I'm sure. Shut down. End of call. Lockard and Elliott look at each other. The blip is still there. Still coming. Growing larger. But they've reported it. Done their job. If the information center doesn't care, nothing more they can do. They shut down at 7:45. 3 minutes later, the first wave crosses the coast. 35 minutes of warning. Gone. Because one lieutenant made one assumption. Didn't escalate. Didn't call superiors. Didn't sound any alarm. Just assumed the most benign explanation and went back to his coffee. But here's the deeper failure. Even if he'd sounded the alarm, would anyone have believed him? Radar is new technology. Experimental. Most officers don't trust it. A warning from privates operating experimental equipment about aircraft nobody expected? Most commanders would have dismissed it as equipment error or atmospheric interference. The technology to detect the attack worked perfectly. The human systems to interpret and act on it failed completely. 3:42 a.m., 3 hours before the air attack. The minesweeper USS Condor spots a submarine periscope near the entrance to Pearl Harbor. They report it to the destroyer USS Ward. Ward investigates. Finds nothing. Contact logged. Everyone goes back to routine. 6:37 a.m., Ward spots the submarine again, this time trailing the supply ship USS Antares into the harbor. Ward attacks immediately. Depth charges, gunfire, direct hit. The submarine sinks. Confirmed kill. Ward reports to headquarters. We just sank a hostile submarine at the harbor entrance. Think about what that means. Enemy submarine. Sunk at Pearl Harbor. That's an act of war. That demands immediate response. Battle stations, full alert. Launch aircraft. Find out if more submarines are out there. This is not a drill. This is actual combat. Nothing happens. The duty officer receives Ward's report and hesitates. Is it real? Could be a false contact. Could be a whale. Equipment error, maybe. Doesn't want to wake the admiral on Sunday morning for a false alarm. He decides to wait for confirmation, get more information, so he does nothing. This pattern repeats throughout the morning. Warning appears. Officer doesn't want to overreact. Waits for more data, assumes the most innocent explanation, doesn't escalate, and by the time the warning is confirmed, bombs are already falling. That submarine was one of 5 Japanese midget submarines trying to penetrate Pearl Harbor. The plan, attack from inside while aircraft hit from above. Coordinated assault. Most of the submarine attack failed. 4 of 5 were sunk or captured. But the attempt itself screamed warning. Something major is happening. Right now. America had 3 hours advance notice. A sunk enemy submarine. Clear proof of hostile action, and did nothing. Because the officer on duty chose caution over alarm. Chose not looking foolish over saving lives. Admiral Kimmel and General Short aren't incompetent. They're experienced commanders given an impossible task. Defend Hawaii against every threat with limited resources and vague intelligence. They have to make choices, prioritize threats, allocate defenses, and they choose wrong. General Short worries most about sabotage. Hawaii has over 150,000 residents of Japanese ancestry. Washington sends warnings about potential fifth columnists. Enemy agents, saboteurs. Short takes this seriously, so he orders all aircraft parked close together in the center of airfields. Easier to guard, fewer sentries needed. Makes perfect sense if sabotage is your primary threat, but it also makes every aircraft a sitting duck for air attack. Parked wingtip to wingtip, no dispersal, no protection. When Japanese bombers arrive, they can't believe their luck. American planes lined up like a firing range, most destroyed before pilots can reach them. Admiral Kimmel has different priorities. He worries about submarines, Long-range reconnaissance, protecting convoys to the Philippines. He doesn't expect air attack on Pearl Harbor itself. Why would he? Too far from Japan, too risky, too well defended. The threat must be elsewhere. Philippines, Malaya, Dutch East Indies. His battleships sit peacefully at anchor. No maximum alert, no extensive air patrols north of Oahu, because he can't imagine the attack coming from that direction. Both commanders make reasonable decisions based on available information, but the information is incomplete, filtered through assumptions, and those assumptions are catastrophically wrong. They're preparing for the war they expect, not the war Japan is about to start. Let's count the failures. Every single one that had to happen for Pearl Harbor to succeed. Intelligence knows war is imminent but can't determine where. Washington sends vague warnings without specifics. Army and Navy don't share intelligence effectively. Japanese carriers disappear and nobody considers Pearl Harbor. Radar detects the attack and the warning is dismissed. Submarines sunk at harbor entrance and nobody sounds alarm. Aircraft parked in clusters making perfect targets. Battleships at anchor without maximum readiness. No long-range reconnaissance north of Oahu. Officers assume Japan won't attack because it seems irrational. Everyone waits for confirmation instead of acting on warnings. 10 major failures. Any one alone might not matter. Altogether, catastrophic. This is what military analysts call a perfect storm. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, at exactly the same time, in exactly the worst way. Japan needed perfect conditions, complete surprise, clear weather, ships in port, aircraft on ground, defenses relaxed. They got all of it, not because their plan was flawless, but because American failures gave them every advantage. There's a concept called normalization of deviance. When unusual things happen but nothing bad results, you start accepting unusual as normal. Submarine sighting? Probably nothing. Strange radar contact? Equipment error? Missing carriers? Probably in home waters. Each warning individually seems explainable, non-threatening, not worth panic. So officers make the safe choice every time. Don't overreact, wait for confirmation, assume the best. And those safe choices repeated over and over create conditions for disaster. Why was Pearl Harbor so unprepared? Because it felt safe. Hawaii is 2,000 miles from Japan. America's Pacific fortress. Modern defenses, strong garrison, powerful fleet. What enemy would dare attack? This psychological factor matters more than any tactical consideration. When you feel safe, you relax. Lower your guard. Assume threats are distant and manageable. Pearl Harbor on December 6th felt like paradise. Sailors at parties in Honolulu. Officers playing golf. Families at the beach. Life was good. Nobody expected war to arrive overnight. Compare that to the Philippines, where MacArthur's forces knew they were front line. Expected attack, maintained higher alert. Even they were surprised, but at least they were mentally prepared. Hawaii wasn't. Hawaii felt like home, like safety, and that false security was more dangerous than any Japanese weapon, because it meant warnings were dismissed, precautions skipped, readiness reduced, all because everyone assumed Pearl Harbor was too important, too far, too well defended to be attacked. Admiral Kimmel later testified he never imagined Japan would strike Pearl Harbor, seemed too risky, too difficult, too unlikely, and because he couldn't imagine it, he didn't prepare for it. That's the danger of assumption. You defend against threats you can imagine. You're vulnerable to threats you can't. Japan understood this perfectly. Yamamoto chose Pearl Harbor specifically because it seemed impossible, because American commanders would never expect it. The audacity of the plan was its greatest protection. December 6th. One day before the attack, American intelligence intercepts Japan's final diplomatic message, 14 parts. The last part transmitted December 6th. Codebreakers decrypted immediately. The message doesn't declare war, but it breaks off negotiations. Clearly means war is imminent. It's scheduled for delivery to the State Department at 1 p.m. Washington time on December 7th. Why that specific time? Analysts try to figure it out. 1 p.m. Washington is early morning in the Pacific, Philippines, Malaya, Dutch East Indies. Probably Japan is timing attacks to coincide with the diplomatic break. Nobody calculates what time it is in Hawaii. 1 p.m. Washington is 7:30 a.m. Hawaii, 30 minutes before the attack. The timing is right there in the message, but nobody sees it. Nobody makes the connection. Washington tries sending a final warning to Hawaii on December 7th morning. War is coming today. Maximum alert. But military communications are backlogged. The message goes by commercial telegram. It arrives in Honolulu during the attack, delivered to Kimmel's headquarters hours after the bomb stopped falling. The intelligence existed. The warnings existed. The ability to prevent or mitigate the attack existed. But the systems to process and act on that intelligence failed at every level, from Washington to Hawaii, from admirals to radar operators. Everyone had puzzle pieces. Nobody assembled the picture in time. After Pearl Harbor, everyone asked how. Congressional investigations, military inquiries, accusations, blame. Kimmel and Short were relieved of command. Many thought they were scapegoated. That real failures were in Washington, in the intelligence system, in coordination between services. Truth is, everyone failed. Kimmel and Short failed to maintain readiness. Washington failed to provide clear intelligence. Army and Navy failed to coordinate. Radar operators were ignored. Submarine warnings dismissed. Diplomatic signals misread. Every link in the chain broke simultaneously. But Pearl Harbor taught America lessons that reshaped national defense forever. Never assume enemies will act rationally. Never dismiss warning signs because they seem unlikely. Never let bureaucratic divisions prevent intelligence sharing. Never feel so safe that you stop being vigilant. After Pearl Harbor, America created centralized intelligence. Eventually the CIA, better coordination between services, serious early warning systems. The understanding that complacency kills. That feeling safe is the most dangerous feeling of all. Japan proved desperate enemies take desperate actions. That audacious plans succeed when defenders aren't ready. That the best attack hits where the enemy feels safest. These lessons cost 2,400 American lives, but they ensured America would never be caught so unprepared again. Pearl Harbor was preventable. Multiple times. Multiple ways. It happened because America made every mistake at the wrong moment, and Japan made every right decision at exactly the right time. The next video covers what happened after Pearl Harbor. Japan's rapid conquest, America's desperate defense, the battles that would define the Pacific War. Part 4 drops in 48 hours. If you're still here, you're who this series is for. Real history. Real decisions, real consequences. This is part 3 of 15 covering the entire Pacific War. For the complete story from Pearl Harbor to surrender, subscribe right now, because the next video reveals how Japan conquered half of Asia in 6 months while America struggled to survive. Don't miss it. Pearl Harbor happened because America couldn't imagine the impossible. The lesson 80 years later, the most dangerous threats are the ones you dismiss as impossible. That's exactly when they happen.